Rick Masters didn't flinch when the ceiling blew open. The overhead plating of Sweetwater Nine's garage bay peeled like a can lid under pressure, exposing the old Earth outpost to the vast silence of orbit. But the force field flared blue and held. Dust swirled. Loose tools clattered to the floor. Rick just stared at the sputtering coffee machine on his workbench. "Come on," he muttered, tapping the side of the old drip unit. "Don't die on me now." Outside the garage doors, half the outpost lay in ruins. Fires burned in vacuum-sealed containment. Sirens wailed low and defeated. Rick scratched his stubble, squinting into the chipped screen of the machine. It blinked a pathetic red. Water tube failure. "You and me both," he sighed. He didn't notice the 6 troopers until their shadows blocked the flickering light. Tall, metallic-skinned, armor like molten obsidian, eyes glowing cold and wrong. The lead one stepped forward, its voice like static drowning in arrogance. "Human. Identify." Rick leaned back against his counter. Rick Masters. Mechanic. Coffee addict. 2-time Employee of the Month back when that meant something. The alien tilted its head. Another one raised a pulsar rifle. "You are under arrest by order of the Triumvirate. Your resistance is futile." Rick blinked slowly. "You really say that? Like out loud? Futile? Man, do you guys have a villain script or something?" They didn't laugh. They didn't even twitch. Figures. Rick lifted his hands as they stepped closer, one trying to scan him. His old work shirt smelled like engine grease and defeat. The patch on his chest still read Rick in fading blue thread. "You're wasting your time, you know," he said, voice calm, conversational. "I don't know anything. Just fix things. Motors. Vents. Occasionally coffee machines that hate me." The alien finished its scan, nodded. The others tightened their circle. Capture complete. Transmit for morale suppression broadcast. Rick's brow furrowed. "Sorry, what now?" He never saw the first punch. His body hit the floor hard, ribs folding in a way they shouldn't. Pain flared white. Metal boots came next. 1, 2, 3. His side, his stomach, his back. The aliens didn't yell, didn't gloat. They just worked through him like machinery. Rick tasted blood, copper, and old regret. He thought briefly of his daughter. Then he thought of cinnamon, because that's what she'd always sprinkled in his coffee as a kid. And the world was turning dark around the edges. The broadcast ran for 16 galactic sectors. A soft-voiced alien narrator explained that this specimen represented the last flicker of Terran resistance. That even their strongest, a mechanic no less, crumbled before the will of the Empire. Rick spat blood toward the camera and grinned through a cracked tooth. "You boys have no idea what you've just done." And then he passed out. High above, aboard the Empire's Victory-class dreadnought Obedience without mercy, General Coral Varazin watched the feed with mild interest. He was a tall being, even by Rayeth standards, his chitin-lined jaw tense with indifference. Behind him, junior officers clicked approval. "Primitive," one said, shaking his head. "No central neural mesh. No cognitive shielding." "Did you see its clothes?" said another. "Cotton. No armor. They are walking extinction notices." Coral tapped a claw on the steel table before him, eyes still fixed on the screen. And yet he smiled. "Pain-induced hallucination," the medic offered. "No," Coral said slowly. That was satisfaction. "Why?" No one had an answer. The broadcast ended. The general turned off the screen. A silence fell in the war room. He stood. "Bring him aboard." Aboard a rusted trade barge drifting along a comet path 2 systems away, something stirred in a dark compartment lined with metal grates and survival tarps. A small screen buzzed, then hissed, then played the transmission. A woman sat cross-legged, her face hidden under a worn hood. She was motionless as the feed played. The blood, the boots, the laughter, the smile. Her hand, pale and scarred, touched the side of the screen. She didn't speak for a long time, but her eyes, green and glass-sharp, never moved from the moment her father looked up and said those words. Finally, she stood. She reached beneath the tarp and pulled out a long, narrow box, metal, scorched, and coated with old Earth defense seals. Inside, black-plated armor lay folded, layered with red carbon lining and strange, bone-white accents. She ran a fingertip over the faint carving etched into the chest plate. The Witch of the Dark. Elena Baba Masters began to suit up in silence. Somewhere far away, an old frequency lit up in a vending machine buried in a back alley of an abandoned Martian colony. The vending machine played Bon Jovi. Back on Sweetwater 9, Rick groaned awake in a holding cell the size of a closet. The walls were metal. The air was stale. His ribs felt like they'd been kicked by a mule with a hangover. 2 alien guards stood watch, muttering in a language he didn't understand. Rick rolled onto his back and stared at the ceiling. "Don't let it be decaf," he whispered to nobody. One of the guards snorted. "Subject is vocalizing nonsense." Rick sat up slowly. "You think I'm the problem here? Look at your face, buddy. You got the jawline of a sock puppet and the conversational skills of a doorknob." The alien raised a stun baton. Rick held up his hands, then grinned. "Kidding. You're doing great. Real intimidating. 10 out of 10. The baton cracked against his shoulder anyway. Rick winced but didn't scream. His vision swam. Cool. Cool. Just making memories. In the command chamber of the Obedience Without Mercy, General Coral turned to a new report. Strange anomalies. Untraceable pings on the outer sensor array. Unscheduled code bursts from derelict machines on fringe planets. Junk frequencies. Dead tech. Still, the same word repeated. Alibaba. He stared at the word. One of the science officers leaned in. A designation? Or a name? The AI assistant chimed in, flat and precise. Cross-reference. Old Earth folklore. Slavic origin. Mythical entity. Woman of death. Hunter of souls. The Baba Yaga. The general scoffed. Ghost stories. Further data suggests Earth applied the name to a covert operative of notable lethality. Coral raised brow ridge. Specify lethality. The AI paused. Estimated kill ratio. 12,901 confirmed. 17,412 presumed. 0 captured. 0 photographed. Believed to have dismantled an entire battalion during the Bratislava incident. The room went silent. The general leaned forward. Any known relation to the prisoner? DNA match. Subject Rick Masters is biological father. The AI's final line dropped like a bomb. Subject Elena Masters. Alias Baba Yaga. Status unknown. Presumed active. General Coral stood, slowly. Sealed the ship. He was too late. In the docking bay, a storage crate began to beep. Back in his cell, Rick was humming. Off-key. Something from back in the 90s. Maybe Caesar. Maybe Springsteen. His breath still hurt. So did his spine. But he smiled anyway. Because the beatings had stopped. Because nobody was talking. Because he'd seen that little camera tucked into the vent. Just a flicker of a red light. Blinking once. Twice. Then dead. She'd seen him. And if she'd seen him. Rick grinned wider, cracked lips, and broken teeth. "Hell's coming," he said softly. One of the guards turned. Rick winked. A second later, the lights went out. On 50 decks of the Dreadnought, panels went dark. Turbolifts froze. Automated systems began playing snippets of the A-Team theme song, looped backward. Alien officers screamed across channels. Systems reported false airlock depressurizations. Whole sections were locked by manual override. One unlucky admiral found his shower playing nothing but human laughter. Rick chuckled in his cell. "Yep," he said to the silence, "that's my girl." In the depths of space, a map flickered to life. It wasn't labeled by Grid or Starline, just a list of locations where Alien Command had wronged humans. At the center of it, Sweetwater 9 blinked red, then vanished. A new signal was sent. Encrypted in ancient junk code, camouflaged behind Pepsi logos and old Earth satellite beacons. A simple phrase, "She's awake," and far below deck, where no camera fed and no guard dared linger, something moved through shadows, too fast for sensors, too silent for alarms. A whisper, a breath, a warning. She had come not as a diplomat, nor a soldier. She had come as a daughter, and by the time anyone realized it, she was already inside. The stars outside the freighter's hull spun slowly, dull and unfazed, while inside the dark belly of the vessel, Elena Masters stripped the last piece of synthetic armor from its seal. The black plate slid into place with a whisper, locking over the red-and-bone bodysuit like the final steps in some ancient ritual. Her gloves, custom-forged, sealed over scarred hands. And the final piece, the mask, remained cradled on a crate beside her. She didn't put it on yet. Instead, Elena sat, breathing slow and even, the hum of the aging engines vibrating gently through the floor. The datapad in her lap still displayed the paused frame from the transmission. Her father's swollen face, blood streaked down his chin, and that expression, pain swallowed beneath a broken smile. She touched the screen. The lights flickered. A faint shudder ran down the ship's spine. Not danger, not a storm, just the ship responding to her. Old vessels did that if they remembered your hands. Sweetwater 9 had been forgotten by the galaxy, but she remembered. Her fingers moved across the pad, typing in a rhythm long dead in military codebooks. The signal she sent was narrowband, buried under layers of obsolescence. It passed through the vacuum like a whisper in a graveyard. She added one word at the end. Feed the witch. Half a galaxy away, inside the hollowed-out shell of a decommissioned space station orbiting a dead star, a vending machine lit up for the first time in 20 years. It whirred. It hummed. Then it exploded. A small puff of steam blew out from behind it, revealing a hidden terminal and a man asleep in a hammock made from surplus wiring. His name was Combo. No last name. No rank. Just Combo. He awoke mid-snore, swinging wildly. Mother of what? Who touched the Fonter array? Then he saw the screen. His bloodshot eyes narrowed. The encryption was old-school Earth Black Ops. Stuff that had been mothballed back when humanity still believed in stealth over spectacle. His fingers, surprisingly nimble, darted over the keypad. Impossible, he whispered. That tag's retired. The screen blinked once. Feed the witch. Ho ho, you're kidding me. Combo grinned, teeth crooked and yellow. Well, holy Star Wars reruns. You're alive. He sat up fully, tapping into sublayer net traffic. It was noisy, congested, but the patterns were there. Small pings. Old relays coming back online. Bootleg Earth signatures traced through stolen Empire satellites. The witch was moving. Somewhere near the fractured moons of the Charon spine, a grizzled ex-marine known only as Dutch was drinking protein sludge from a tin mug when his HUD flared red. He froze. The call sign glowed in the corner of his eye. Forgotten, sacred. Burned into the old soldier part of his brain. He stood, knocked over his mug, and opened a case he'd promised never to touch again. Inside, his armor, rusted but waiting, painted red with 3 white streaks, like claw marks across the chest. He muttered a curse under his breath. She told me she'd never call. And still, he strapped it on. On a junk moon orbiting a trash planet no one cared about, a hobo wielding 2 sharpened broom handles emerged from a pit of bottles and muttered, "She's coming." Reports flickered across alien command systems. Subspace irregularities. Comms blackouts. The reactivation of long-dead orbital junk with unknown human code. No one in the Empire's intelligence wing had the context or courage to file the proper classification, except for one officer. Lieutenant Zarnreth, an analyst with 3 eyes and an obsessive streak that made his peers avoid him, was connecting the pieces. He pulled up everything the Empire had ever recorded on the designation Baba Yaga. Most of it was myth, but the patterns were there. Mercenaries disappearing. Whole outposts silenced. An unbroken kill chain spanning over 30 planetary systems. And always, always, one common thread: no survivors, no footage, no explanation. Just whispers. A tall woman in black. A breath before death. His superior waved it off. It's just old human propaganda. Reth didn't sleep that night. Back aboard her freighter, Elena moved silently through the ship's narrow halls. She had no crew, no weapons team, no AI, just her, and a promise. Her mask now hung from her hip, its bone-white grin dulled by age. It was painted with red lines across the cheekbones, sharp and precise. She didn't wear it unless it was necessary. Tonight it would be. She powered up the ship's core. Not fast, not flashy, just reliable. The engines coughed, then roared to life, and the galaxy shifted 1 inch closer to consequence. A message blinked onto her console. Combo, I got Dutch. He's in. That makes 3. What's the play? She typed 2 words. Coming home. Back aboard the Obedience without mercy, General Coral Varazin was holding a meeting that had begun with shouting and devolved into silence. He didn't like silence. It meant someone knew something he didn't. Explain, he said coldly. His chief of information systems, a creature with far too many limbs and not nearly enough composure, sweated visibly under his general's gaze. We're detecting static echoes. Backward signal loops using Earth era nodes. It's impossible. Nothing is impossible, Coral snapped. Only unexpected. A new officer entered the room with trembling hands, holding a datapad. Sir, we traced the encryption. The signature leads to an old Earth-based infiltration codex. Retired. Obsolete. Coral looked up. Designation. The officer hesitated. Yaga Protocol. The name dropped like a hammer. Officers exchanged glances. Some whispered. Coral rose. She's real. Silence again. He savored it for one breath. Then barked, lock every docking bay. Scan for unauthorized vessels. Double the guard on the human prisoner. He's unconscious, someone offered weakly. Coral turned, voice sharp and surgical. Which means he's useless. But she won't see it that way. On deck 42, Rick Masters was not unconscious. He was staring at a tiny screw on the ceiling, thinking about hot dogs. He remembered the way they used to taste at ball games. The fake cheese. The messy relish. He smiled to himself. People used to call him a relic. And maybe he was. But some relics were sacred. The guard outside his cell wasn't paying attention. Empire guards rarely did. Especially when they assumed a beaten human was as harmless as a discarded wrench. Rick listened. The sound came faintly at first. Then clearer. A hum. It wasn't mechanical. It was musical. He recognized the song. I Ran, by a flock of seagulls. It played softly through the ventilation shafts. He grinned wide. She's close. Somewhere near the aft loading docks of the Dreadnought, a cargo loader slammed open. No one saw who tripped the lock. No alarms rang. But the lights changed color, slightly. Subtly. From sterile blue to flickering red. One of the junior officers tapped a console. Sir, we're reading movement in Sector 12. Show me, Coral ordered. The screen flickered. Empty corridor. Then static. Then a frame. Brief. Blurred. But there. A figure. Tall. Armored. Bone-white mask. Coral's claws dug into the metal table. Send a unit. The unit did not return. Back in the freighter, Combo's link went green. He opened a line and whispered, Dutch is en route. He brought the Night Widow. Elena didn't answer. She was already aboard the Dreadnought. It was strange, walking again in enemy halls. Her boots barely made sound. She remembered their structure, their weaknesses. Empire ships always overbuilt their command centers and undersecured their maintenance shafts. She moved through shadow. No gunfire. No explosions. Yet, the time for loud would come. She made her way toward deck 42. Toward him. Every step etched into memory. Her hand brushed the wall. She felt him. She always could. Rick stared up at the ceiling. The music faded. The screw rattled. Then fell. He stood slowly, ignoring the protests of his ribs. The vent above him opened. 2 black-gloved hands dropped silently. One reached out. He didn't hesitate. Elena pulled him up into the vent like he weighed nothing. They didn't speak at first. She held him steady. He gripped her shoulder, eyes wide. She took off her mask. Her face was harder now. Lines at the corners of her mouth. Hair cut short. Scars where youth had once been. But her eyes, still his. Hi, Dad, she whispered. He swallowed. You always had the worst timing. She smiled, just barely. You always made the worst coffee. They hugged. Quiet. Desperate. The kind of embrace forged in years and pain and understanding. Then she pulled away. I need you off this ship. You can't do this alone. Yes, I can. No, he said. Not this time. She hesitated. I'll find you a way out, she said. Combo's got a lock on the life pods. Dutch is jamming comms. He grabbed her arm. You sure? She nodded once. It's already started. Outside the Obedience Without Mercy, 3 civilian-looking freighters, uncloaked. Each bristled with weapons long banned under Galactic Accords. Each bore the marks of the forgotten Terran war dogs. The lights aboard the dreadnought flickered again. In the Empire's war room, Coral barked orders. Launch interceptors. Find her. Find them all. But it was already too late. The galaxy had made one mistake. It had touched the daughter of Rick Masters. And now it would learn. Some humans don't fight because they're brave. They fight because they've been quiet too long. The teapot hissed softly in the dark. It rested on an improvised burner, surrounded by the shattered ruins of a luxury officer's lounge aboard Obedience Without Mercy. The table had once been polished obsidian, now scarred by heat and blood. Elena sat in the only chair still upright, calm and composed, her black armor peeling in places where shrapnel had kissed the surface. She held a chipped cup between 2 gloved fingers, inhaling the rising steam as if the galaxy wasn't unraveling 3 decks above her. Across from her, bound to a chair with his own command cords, was Vice Admiral Trozek. He wheezed through a punctured lung, blood matting the fringe of his ceremonial armor. His face bore the soft, smug features of someone who'd only known victory. Until now. Elena sipped the tea. It's mint, she said quietly. Closest thing to chamomile in this quadrant. Trozek coughed, blinking slowly. You're a myth. She tilted her head. That's what makes it fun. Why tea? He croaked, glancing at the pot as if it were a bomb. She looked at it, smiled. Because I promised myself that when I came here, I'd do one thing calmly before the storm. Tea is human, centering. And frankly, I like the sound it makes when the pot boils. A distant explosion echoed through the ship. The lighting above them flickered between red emergency hue and the stutter of failing systems. She set the cup down. You're going to tell me where my father is. Trozek bared his fangs, not teeth, fangs, though the gesture was less terrifying when one eye had swollen shut. I don't fear pain. Good, Elena said, rising slowly. Because I've stopped using it as a tactic. It's not efficient. She moved behind him. He stiffened, expecting a blow, a blade, something brutal. Instead, she leaned in and whispered a string of old Earth names into his ear. Trozek froze. His breathing went shallow. I know what you did to them, she said. I know what you authorized on station, Selu 9. I know what you let your men do when the cameras were disabled. You don't get to die proud, Admiral. He trembled. You're a soldier. No, she said. I was a soldier. Now I'm what soldiers pray doesn't crawl out of the dark. She reached down, tapped his temple lightly with her finger. You're going to walk me through your command logs. Every deck, every hidden room, every override protocol. Because if you don't, I will make you useful in ways that have nothing to do with technology. He whispered a code. It unlocked 7 restricted files in her retinal HUD. She nodded. See, she said softly. Tea works better than terror. Sometimes. She turned her back to him and walked to the console. Behind her, Trozek sagged in his chair, sweating, muttering old prayers to stars that no longer answered. Above them, Deck 11 ignited. Not in flames, but in terror. Dutch moved like a thunderclap through the corridors. He wasn't elegant, wasn't quiet, but he didn't need to be. His armor made the floor shudder. Twin cannons mounted on his arms sang in bursts of sizzling blue, each pulse sending Rayeth guards sprawling like marionettes with cut strings. He bellowed as he walked. Where's the party? Combo's voice crackled in his earpiece. 3 o'clock. And maybe turn down the noise? You're scaring the systems. Good, Dutch growled. They should be scared. Behind him, lights snapped out one by one. On purpose. Elena had triggered a cascading blackout, leaving only essential systems, gravity, oxygen, and select tracking nodes she could control. The ship had become a labyrinth, and she was the thread winding its center. She moved through the service ducts above Trozek's lounge, graceful and lethal, her mask back on now, glowing faintly where the eyes should be. Below, the Admiral screamed once before going silent. Whether from guilt or fear, she didn't care. She had what she needed. She reached Deck 42 in 5 minutes. Slipped past 3 guards. Killed only 1. The other 2 she left unconscious, deliberately. Let them wake up. Let them talk. Let the rumor spread. She met Combo in a dark junction where once there had been a mess hall. Now it looked more like a butcher's corridor. Not by her hand, Dutch had passed through. Combo stood ankle-deep in debris, typing furiously into a wrist console cobbled from 3 species tech. He didn't look up when she arrived. "They're trying to reboot command privileges," he said. "Whole ship's AI is screaming. You have maybe 7 minutes before they can hit full lockdown. Get Rick out now." Combo looked up finally. "He won't go." "Then lie." "You ever known him to fall for lies?" She sighed. "Then tell him I said please." That got a smile. "I'll tell him you threatened to drag him." They parted without a word. Each knew what came next. On Deck 51, the High Command chamber fell into chaos. General Coral stood surrounded by advisors, many of them now bleeding or shouting into fracture comms. Their elite systems, the pride of Empire engineering, had failed one by one. Entire decks vanished from the schematics. Internal comms looped Seinfeld laugh tracks. Airlocks beeped warning tones to the rhythm of Stayin' Alive. Coral's fury was absolute. "Find her." "We can't. She's not on any cameras." "Then burn the decks." One officer hesitated. "General, your nephew is on Deck 12. "Burn it." Somewhere in the vent system, Elena smirked. She'd heard it all. She wasn't worried. The Empire never understood what fear actually was. Fear wasn't the gun. It wasn't the blood. Fear was silence before the scream. The moment before realization hit that your rules didn't apply anymore. That the person you thought you were oppressing was actually judging you like a god preparing fire. That was what she brought. She dropped into the command hallway like a shadow that had grown bored of hiding. Her boots hit the floor with a soft thud. 4 guards turned. Only one managed to lift a weapon. It didn't matter. She moved like liquid shadow. Each motion honed in the kind of training humanity buried under 7 layers of denial. Her blade hummed low, no sound, just vibration. She stepped past the first man, and he collapsed in 3 pieces. The second never saw her. The third fired, twice, both shots vanishing into the folds of her armor as she rolled and struck upward, blade finding the gap in his jawplate. The fourth ran. She led him. Coral stepped into the corridor, just in time to see her eyes. Her mask smiled at him. He sneered. "Do you know who I am?" She nodded. "Then you know you won't leave this ship alive." She drew her second blade. "I'm not trying to." Coral roared, charging with a high-frequency blade. His form was perfect, military textbook. She wasn't in the book. They clashed once. Sparks flew. Twice. Blood hit the wall, his. She broke his stance, shattered his leg at the knee with a low sweep, and had him against the bulkhead in under 12 seconds. He stared up at her, breathing like a cornered animal. "You don't win," he spat. "You just burn everything down." She leaned close. "No. I leave something behind." He shook his head. "What?" She stepped back. "Fear." He lunged, last desperate act of a defeated man, and caught nothing but air as her boot met his chest. He flew into the wall, hard, and stayed down. She looked up at the nearest camera. "Bring me my father," she said. Combo heard the message and relayed it before the next network sweep could jam the line. Rick was waiting at the evac pod. His hand hovered near the release lever. He wasn't crying. Not quite. Dutch stood behind him, protective as a mountain with a shotgun. "You don't have to go back," Dutch said. Rick didn't answer. "Combo said she's making a path. If you stay, you're just a hostage." Still nothing. Then Rick looked up. She made it, didn't she? Dutch smiled, slow and proud. Like a goddamn myth. Rick exhaled and looked to the pod. He didn't board. Instead, he turned back toward the smoke-choked corridor. Dutch sighed. Of course you're not going. Rick grinned, just a bit. She brought me tea. The evac pod hissed closed. Alarms continued to scream. And above it all, Elena moved through fire and ruin, toward the core of the ship, where the final line was drawn. She had one last job, and she would finish it, even if the stars themselves had to dim. Smoke coiled through the heart of the ship like a living thing, whispering against steel walls, scorched by gunfire and ruptured plasma lines. The dreadnought Obedience without mercy, once the Galactic Empire's pride, drifted unmoored in orbit, its lights stuttering like dying stars. Elena Masters moved through its final corridor with the stillness of inevitability. Every breath she drew came sharp with ash and victory. Her armor bore the evidence, blaster pocks, blade scores, and a streak of dark green blood smeared down her side where a command officer had tried one last panic strike. The command bridge loomed ahead, sealed, fortified, locked behind security only high command could override. She had the codes. She didn't need them. She pulled a satchel from her back and knelt by the door panel, fingers moving with precision that had been trained and retrained into instinct. Wires sparked. Circuits buzzed. She spoke softly to herself, not for magic, not for comfort, but for timing. 3, 2, 1. The blast wasn't loud, just enough to disable the lock and knock the guards inside off balance. She stepped through the smoke as it cleared, blade sheathed, hands empty. The last remaining general of the dreadnought's ruling triad stood at the center of the bridge, weapon raised, flanked by 4 armed guards with pale armor and fear in their eyes. He barked something in his language, a threat, likely, or maybe a plea dressed up in dominance. Elena said nothing. He fired. The bolt hit her square in the chest. She didn't fall. The impact staggered her half a step, but the armor held. Smoke hissed from the scorch mark. She tilted her head, rolled her neck once, and advanced. The guards fired together. She moved low, not like a soldier, but like something that had been built for a different kind of war. She closed the distance in seconds, a flurry of shadow and bone-white grin. The first guard's rifle shattered in her grip. She drove the heel of her palm into his throat, spun into the second, and disarmed him with a twist that broke 3 fingers. The third backed up, tripped over the console, and the fourth turned to run before her blade found the gap beneath his helmet. Then there was silence. The general stood his ground, but he was trembling now. She could see it in his hands, in the way his eyes darted toward the emergency evac console. "Don't bother," she said. "The pods are gone." "Why?" he demanded, voice cracking. "Why do all this? You've already won." She stepped over the bodies, without ceremony. "My father." His jaw tightened. He was nothing. He was mine. She reached the console at the heart of the bridge and began entering coordinates. A self-destruct sequence blinked to life. The general gasped. "You're insane." "No," she said. "I'm thorough." He lunged. One last burst of courage or desperation. She didn't draw a weapon, just sidestepped, pivoted, and used his own momentum to send him crashing into the edge of the console. He slumped, groaning. She knelt beside him. "I want you to understand," she said quietly. "This isn't about strategy, or rebellion, or proving humanity's worth." He blinked, blood pooling beneath him. "This is about what happens," she continued, "when you teach a daughter the smell of burning metal before she learns what peace even means. When you beat a man like Rick Masters and broadcast it across stars like a trophy." She stood again. "You didn't just kill people," she said. "You made them remember." Outside, the dreadnought's remaining crew scrambled. Some tried to flee. Others sent distress signals to a fleet that was already fractured by whispers of mutiny, sabotage, and the growing fear of Earth's witch. In orbit, Dutch's freighter hovered just beyond the blast radius. Engines ready, turrets primed. Combo monitored every frequency, hands flying across a cracked console. "She's in," he muttered. Countdown started. Dutch grunted. "How long?" 7 minutes. And Rick. Combo glanced at a separate feed. The camera flickered to life. Rick stood in one of the maintenance tunnels, blood on his face, clothes torn, but alive. And stubborn. He was walking toward the bridge. Combo cursed. He's not on the evac route. Dutch's brow furrowed. Tell him. I did. And he said something about cinnamon. Dutch groaned. Of course he did. Onboard obedience without mercy, alarms blared. Fire suppression systems had failed. Gravlocks destabilized. Elena leaned over the console and sealed the bridge doors behind her. She expected resistance. She didn't expect the familiar cough behind her. Hell of a view, Rick said, stepping into the smoke, leaning slightly against the frame. She turned fast, one hand twitching toward her blade before freezing. Dad. His face broke into a crooked grin. Told you I still knew how to sneak past people. You're supposed to be off this ship. He stepped closer, limping. So are you. I told Combo I raised you better than this. They stood in the middle of the wreckage, the lights dimming further, the ship groaning like something old dying slowly. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a dented thermos. She stared. He opened it and handed it to her. Cinnamon, he said. She took it, hands suddenly trembling. The scent hit her hard, too much memory packed into too little space. You're supposed to survive this, he said, not turn it into a story people tell around a campfire. She drank. The warmth hit her chest like a second heartbeat. I don't want to leave this unfinished, she whispered. He touched her shoulder. You finished it. Look around. The console blinked its final warning. 1 minute to core detonation. She looked at her father. He was tired, bruised, worn down to bone and stubbornness. But he was whole. You have a way out? He asked. She nodded. He waited. She gestured behind the auxiliary panel. Maintenance ducked. 15 seconds to reach the drop bay. They didn't speak as they moved. The ship around them screamed. Fire spilled from cracked doors. Sirens wailed like morning songs. Somewhere distant, what remained of command tried to fight the inevitable. They slid down the maintenance chute and landed hard in the drop bay. Dutch was waiting with the hatch open, Combo waving from inside. 10 seconds. Combo shouted. Elena pulled her father through and hit the seal. Behind them, the hatch slammed shut. They launched. The freighter banked hard as the Obedience, without mercy, burst into light. The explosion bloomed in silence, a slow dancing flower of destruction, casting their ship in gold and orange, and the last breath of vengeance. Rick watched it from the viewport. Elena stood beside him, her mask tucked under one arm. They didn't cheer. They didn't cry. They watched. Combo broke the silence from the cockpit. Message is already spreading. Empire's running scared. They're blaming it on some human ghost. They're not wrong, Dutch said. Rick sat down groaning. Please tell me you have real coffee. Combo laughed. We've got Tang duct tape and a mixtape from 1993. Rick grunted. Close enough. Elena sat beside him. Was it worth it? He asked. She didn't answer for a long time. Then, softly, it was never about worth. It was about memory. He nodded. Outside, the stars kept burning. In the days that followed, the story spread faster than the wreckage. A human woman, no name confirmed, broke the spine of a dreadnought. Some said she flew without a ship. Others said she'd hacked the systems using Earth music. One account swore she used a frying pan. All agreed she was angry, and that the Empire had made one mistake too many. On the edge of neutral space, in a quiet station that served bad drinks and decent silence, two strangers met in the corner. One whispered, "Did you hear about the witch?" The other sipped their drink. "She's a story." "Are you sure?" A pause. "No." Back aboard the freighter, Elena cleaned her armor in silence. Rick sat nearby, sipping lukewarm coffee from a cracked mug. After a while, he said, "You planning to disappear again?" She didn't answer. "I figured." She turned to him. "When I was little," she said, "you told me monsters weren't real." He smirked. "They weren't. Then they touched you." She smiled, tired and full. then reached into her bag and pulled out a new thermos. This one was red. Matte finish. Earth-made. She handed it to him. He opened it, sniffed. Cinnamon. She nodded. "You really are the scariest damn thing in this galaxy," he said, voice soft. "I know." They sat together in the quiet hum of exile, the stars spinning around them like witnesses. And far, far away, the Empire watched the darkness, praying the witch never danced again.